Hello friends, welcome back to the tetrahedron chemistry classes. So guys, in the organometallic lecture series, this is my lecture 19th, and today I am going to discuss chemical bonding in metallocenes. Okay, so as you can see here, the general formula for metallocenes we can write in that manner: pi C5H5 whole twice M, where M is the transition metal. Okay, basically we actually generally focus on the first series transition metals only in this lecture, and C5H5 is your cyclopentadienyl ligand, which occurs twice. Okay, because this cyclopentadienyl anion cyclopentadienyl ligand, actually not anion, it generally in these complexes it acts as a radical. Okay, so this ligand has a special affinity for the metals, so it can interact, the two such ligands can interact with the metal to form a special kinds of the organometallic compounds, which are known as the metallocenes, right? And we will see the chemical bonding concepts in the metallocenes today. So the first actually compound which was synthesized or discovered by the expert is the ferrocene. So I can write the formula here: ferrocene. Okay, and this ferrocene is actually the prototype, and after the discovery of this particular molecule, this metallocenes actually has attracted various scientists, and lots of other metallocenes are also developed then. So you will remember this point: it is the first metallocene. Okay, it is the first metallocene discovered, and if you want to know the structure of this, then it's quite easy to draw the structure. Say this is your ligand, okay, and in the center you are having your iron, and then you are having another ligand over there, and one bond where this iron will form with the one CP ring, and another bond it will form with the another CP ring. So this is the structure of the ferrocene, and if you focus on the conformation of this one, so it is staggered conformation. Please remember, it is staggered conformation. Okay, why staggered conformation? You can focus on the two rings. This ring, this ring is formed in that manner, and this ring actually is you can see this apex, it is pointing downward, and this apex is pointing upward actually, right? So this actually forms the staggered conformations. That means complete overlapping or complete overlapping of the bonds would not occur, right? Say how I can explain this one. Say for example, you are having this ring, the upper one, okay, and if you try to put this particular ring, this one, over it, so you will actually end up with this kind of situation. Okay, let me remove it. First. Say this is the ring, bottom one, okay, and then you are having this ring. So these actually bonds will not cover. So this is the staggered conformations. However, it is not very clear from this figure. Then you can remember in that manner, these two actually rings are in the staggered form. Okay, and if you want to know the geometry of this one, exact geometry, so this ring is actually lie in the xy plane. Say for example, this is your x plane, right, x coordinate, and at the right angles to this you are having your y coordinate. Okay, similarly here also, this is your x coordinate and this is your y coordinate. So this ring is in the xy plane, please remember. And the molecular axis, if you focus on the molecular axis, say this one, right, this is the molecular axis, this one. So this is actually what your z axis, your z coordinate. Okay, so this is very important. This ring lies in the xy plane and the molecular axis is the z axis, and it is the staggered conformation. Now if you want to draw the eclipse conformation for this one, then you can very quickly draw the eclipse conformation also. So this is the 5-membered ring and this is the iron. Okay, and now you see both the rings are actually drawn in such a fashion that this carbon and this carbon actually pointing in the upward direction. So if you try to lift this ring and placed over it, then it will completely superimposed on each other actually. So this is actually your eclipsed conformation. Please remember, this is eclipsed conformation. Okay, and this eclipse conformation is little more stable. See guys, this is very important to note that, because in certain textbooks you will find that the staggered form of ferrocene is the more stable, but you should know actually this eclipsed form is little more stable than the staggered form. The reason we will discuss in some other lecture actually. Okay, and if you want to know the bond lengths in this ferrocene, then you will find this Fe carbon bond length, both Fe carbon bond length is somewhere around 2.045 angstrom, okay, plus minus 0.01, okay, plus minus 0.01, or you can say the 204 picometer. Okay, you can convert this into okay, this is in angstrom. Okay, please remember. And if you want to know the carbon bond length of all carbon bond length of your CP rings, then it would be 1.40 angstrom, that is 140 picometer. Okay, so all bond length, whether this one, 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 and this one, they all are actually the same. So these things actually you should know. Okay, now say for example, what we can do actually now, see in that case, please remember this point also, this CP actually, right, I can write it as CP. In this complex it acts as the radical, okay, and hence it is 5 electron donor. Please remember it is 5 electron donor, right, and in between them you will have iron. Say if it is ferrocene, then you will have iron in it, okay, and then you will have your another 5 membered ring. Okay, so 5 electron donor it is, and you know iron actually will contribute 8 electron, so your ferrocene is actually 18 electron system. Okay, it is quite stable. That's why actually the study, the discovery of this actually occurred fast actually. So these things actually you should know. This is very, very important. Now the important thing is that how the chemical bonding would occur in it. Please remember, see, we will focus on the general chemical bonding in the metallocenes. However, if you take the example of the ferrocene, it will not make any difference actually. The molecular orbital diagram, right, the molecular orbital diagram which we will draw by using the ligand field theory actually will apply for all the your metallocenes like ferrocene, cobaltocene, nickelocene, right, vanadocene, for all actually this will work actually. Right. So now you can see here how we can see the chemical bonding in it. So I am writing chemical bonding. Okay. So to know the chemical bonding, guys, you first of all you should know in that case, if you have see this CP ring actually, if I draw this CP ring again here, okay, all carbon are actually sp2 hybridized. Okay, all 5 carbons are sp2 hybridized. When all 5 carbons are sp2 hybridized, that means it will this CP ring will have unhybridized p orbital in it. Okay, so how we can draw that unhybridized p orbital, right? So you can see here, next ring orbitals I am going to draw now. Say this is the CP ring, okay, and now you focus on this. This is the p orbital unhybridized. This is also the unhybridized p orbital. This is also unhybridized p orbital. This is also unhybridized orbital. This is also unhybridized p orbital. And please remember, this unhybridized orbital which is in the center, okay, which is this one, this will carry a single electron. This will carry a single electron which will be utilized in the formation of the bond. Please remember this one. Okay, so if you want to draw these molecular orbital diagram, then you should know actually how the geometry of the ring orbitals look like. So in the first case, you can see here, if I give them the same phases, right? So I am shading I am shading this in that manner, all are pointing upward. So when all are pointing upward, what can happen in that case? This can overlap with this one, this can overlap with this one, this one can overlap with this one, and this sextet will complete. This actually cyclic nature of the electrons will complete in that case. So how you can make it? See, this can interact with this one, this can interact with this one, this can interact with this one, and this one. Since all the same phases actually are bonding, so in that case there is no node. There is no node. When there is no node present in this ring, then you can give this diagram a symbol, and that symbol I can call it as A. Okay, or more correctly, see, you can call it as A, or you say A1. These are the, see, the conclusion. See how, from where actually I am putting this one. The exact explanation actually comes in the group theory. So I am not going to discuss the group theory, but you should remember whatever the letter I will use here, this actually comes from the your group theory, and A1 actually represents the non-degeneracy. It is non-degenerate. Non-degenerate. Please remember this point. Okay. Now what you can do, secondly, again you can draw this CP ring in that manner. So this is my CP ring, and if I want to put a node in it, so what I can do, I can put a node here. This is my nodal plane. Okay, so I can write it as nodal plane. So that means it is having one node over it. Okay, so when it is having one node, so how you can draw the structure? Okay, this one and this one. So how we can put the node in it? Say for example, this is the shaded part, and this shade part is up. Okay, in the second case, this is your shaded part, and here this is the shaded part. Okay, there is no meaning of putting shaded and unshaded part for this one. Okay, so if you now you can see here, if you overlap them, what can happen? This can overlap with this one, this will put one node in it. Okay, and now this is quite clear here. So this can overlap with this one. Okay, or what I can do, I can actually remove this one. So here what you can see here, see same phases, to overlap with the same phases we have to cross this nodal plane. That's why it is having node over there. Okay, while for rest of the things it is quite fine. How it is quite fine, you see here in that case. Now this can overlap beautifully with this one, this can overlap beautifully with this one. Okay, however there is no need to go in the details. So in short, it is having one node actually, right? When it is having one node, you can give the name, that is E1. You can call it as E1. And see, there is another way by which you can put a node in it. Say this is your CP, right? And these are the p orbitals, just like that. Okay, and now if you shade this, what you can do, just like that. Okay, you can shade this part actually, and you can shade this part, and you can shade this part. Okay, now if you want to overlap, so you can see here, if you want to see, however this picture is not looking very great, but you can, okay, what I can do, I can take little bit of time to draw in the correct fashion so that you can have better idea. Just like that. Okay, so you can put these orbitals just like that. Okay, now you can shade it. I can shade this part and this part. Okay, and I can shade this part and this part. So in that case, you can see one node is also present here. Why? Because in that case you can see here the shaded part is up, here shaded part is down actually, so they cannot overlap actually. Same is true for this one. This is shaded part is up, and this shaded part, this unshaded part is up, so they cannot overlap. So that means in that case one node is there. So however, if you want to do the overlapping, this can beautifully overlap with this one. Okay, but this cannot overlap with this one actually. Why? Because they are having the different phases. So this is another way by which you can put the node in it. So you can call it as E1 also. This is also E1. So there are two methods, that mean it is doubly degenerate. So E represents here doubly degenerate. Doubly degenerate. Please remember this point. Okay. Similarly, if you want, then you can think about the other nodes also. Say for example, I have drawn this one, and what I can do, I can put the orbitals here. This is P, this is P, this is P again, this is P again. Okay, and here what I can do, I can shade this part. Say this is this one, and this shaded part is here, and this shaded part is down, and this shaded part is up. So how we can put the node in it? See, this is one node. Why one node? Because this is unshaded part is up, here shaded part is up, so they cannot overlap. This had to go in that direction. Okay, so this is one node actually. So there is another method by which you can do, by which you can put the node here also. You can see this is the second node. So this is the node 1 and this is the node 2. Again, two nodes are present. When two nodes are present, then you can call it as E2. Okay, and again you see there is another way of putting these two nodes. How? Okay, I am taking little bit of time in explaining all these things, because sometimes for the beginner it is difficult to understand how it is happening actually. So that's why I am explaining from the beginning actually. So if you shade the parts, so what you can do, say you can shade this part and shade this part, remain this part as such, and this is, you see again the shaded part. So here again you can see this is shaded part, this is unshaded part, that mean that they cannot overlap. So there is a node in between them. So this is the node, this is node 1. Okay, and again you can see here, if you want, then if you overlap this with this one, so these two cannot overlap because opposite phases are there. Okay, when opposite phases are there, that means another node is present here. This is node 2. So again you can call it as E2. So these two are also doubly degenerate. Doubly degenerate. So I hope this is clear to you why this is non-degenerate, because there is no node in it, and you have only one way by which you cannot have no node in it actually. So when you have the one node here in that case, right? When you have the one node in that case, you can put one node in that manner, you can put one node in that manner. That means two possible orientations are there. That means it is doubly degenerate. These two will have the same energy, and same is true for this one. So guys, please remember, this is something very important which you should know actually, right? So why this is very important? What can happen? See, these I have shown for only for the one CP ring. Okay, so say now for example, say this is only for one CP ring, and if you have another CP ring, say second CP ring, so what can happen? These all 5 orbitals of one CP ring can combine with the another 5 orbitals or another 5 orbitals of another CP rings by using the linear combination of atomic orbitals methods. And you know, in the linear combination of atomic orbitals, what can happen? This A1 actually will combine with the this A1 of first CP will combine with the A1 of another CP, right? So they will produce a ligand group orbital. Okay, so ligands, when two ligands will interact, they will produce a ligand group orbital. Similarly, this can interact with these E1 can interact with the another set of the E1 to produce the ligand group orbital, and same is true for this one. This is something very important which you should know. So when you have the 5, see now what you can see here, if you have 5 here and 5 here, so total 10 LGOs will form in that case. Total 10 LGOs, ligand group orbitals, 5 plus 5, that will give you the 10 Lie group orbitals. And it is very important to know the symmetry and the properties of the Lie group orbitals, because the symmetry of these Lie group orbitals will decide actually will decide how actually these Lie group orbitals will combine with the atomic orbitals of your transition metal, right, in order to form a metallocene complex. This is something very, very important which you should know. I hope this is clear to you. Now what I can do, say here I have shown you all these things actually, and I can show you how the one CP ring can combine with the another CP ring, but it will take lot of time. So I am explaining only one thing, and rest you will do by your own actually. Okay, and however there is no there is no need to go in that much of the detail. Okay, but you should know the concept, then you can remember it. Okay, say for example, I am combining these orbitals. Say this is my first CP ring. Okay, and this is my second CP ring, and in that case I am using this, and this. Okay, and same I am doing here, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So what I am doing, I can shade these parts. So what I can do, I can shade this. Actually shading will give you the same phase. It shows the same phase actually. However, you can put the plus minus also in order to save your time. So this is shaded part, and in that case you can see I am drawing the shaded part in the bottom lobes. Okay, this is how I can draw it. So what can happen now, if see, you can very beautifully see here, this lobe can combine with this very beautifully. How? Because same phase are there, you see, it can combine with this one. So this can also combine with this one. Similarly, if you want, then you can see here, this can combine with this one, and this can combine with this one, and finally this can combine with this one. These can overlap. So when such kind of overlapping is there, it will result actually in the ligand group orbitals. It will result in the ligand group orbitals. Please remember this point. So here you can see in that case actually no node is there in that case on both the CP rings, right? So basically it is what? A1G. It is A1G, where G stands for the G rate actually. Okay, so how I can explain the G rate? See, you know, G rate means your center of symmetry is present. When in the molecular orbitals, or say in the molecule, your center of symmetry is present, then your system would be the G rate. So how it is G rate, I will explain you. Okay, so when they combine, we can give this picture here. Say this is the sigma framework of one CP ring. This is the sigma framework of one CP ring, and here this combination I can draw in that manner. See, when we are using the linear combination of atomic orbital, the area would enhance actually, right? So probability of finding the electron would be maximum in that case. That means the bonding molecular orbital would result. And again you see, this is your second CP ring, and this is the sigma framework. Blue is the sigma framework of your second CP ring, and here you see this is the orbital, ligand group orbital. And now what I can do here, you can see here in that case here upper lobe is actually the vacant. That means it is hollow actually, so we cannot touch this one. But the lower lobes of this CP rings actually is the shaded part. So what I can do, I can put this shaded part in the lower lobe. Okay, similarly in that case you can see the upper part is actually the shaded part, and the lower part is the unshaded part. So I'll not touch this unshaded part, but I'll put this shaded part up actually, right? And in between then somewhere your metal would be sandwiched. Okay, so this is how you can draw. So this is the ligand group orbital. I can write it as LGO and you can call it as A1G. How this A1G has formed? This A1G has formed by the linear combination of these two A1G orbitals. And why this is G-rate, center of symmetry is there. Say you can understand in that manner. If I start from this end actually, right? If I start from this end and travel through the molecule, and when I reach the center, I move to the equal distance but in the opposite direction. So you see here, this is also the unshaded part, this is also the unshaded part. That means we are having the same kind of the geometry or same kind of the say wave function through the center of the molecule. That means it is the G-rayed one. Okay, so that's why the G-rayed and un-G-rayed concept is there. That means center of symmetry is present here in that case. Ci is present. Okay, similarly you can, what you can do, say I can explain you this thing also. Say this is my first CP ring, okay, and this is my second CP ring. I can draw this in that manner, and you are having these lobes. Okay, I can put all these lobes here. Now if I want to shade them all, so what I can do, say in the top part I am shading this just like that, and in that case again in the top part I am shading this. Okay, now if you want to overlap, so you can see here, this is unshaded part, this is shaded part. Okay, and here see, this is unshaded, this is shaded, this is unshaded, this is shaded. Similarly this is unshaded, this is shaded, so they cannot actually overlap. So they will give you actually the anti-bonding kind of the interaction. So when they give the anti-bonding kind of the interaction, okay, so that means they are the un-G-rayed one. So how I can draw the un-G-rayed in that case? This is the, say, sigma framework, and you see here, this is my this lobe and this is this lobe, upper and the lower lobe. Okay, same you can draw here. This is upper lobe and this is the lower lobe. So if I shade this, so what it can result, see, upper part is shaded part in that case. You can see here, this these upper lobes are the shaded one, so I have made this in that manner. Here also the upper part, the shaded one. So what I can do, I can put this here. Okay, and now if you test the center of symmetry in it, then you will find in that case, if you travel from here and reaching to the center of the molecule somewhere here, and if you travel to the equal distance in the opposite direction, you see here shaded part is there, here unshaded part is there. That means the wave function sign is different. That means it is un-G-rayed one. So you can call it as A1U LGO. This is again LGO, which is the A1G, and in that case Ci is absent, center of symmetry is not there. Okay, so you can call it as 2 A1U combines, they give you the 1 A1U, right, which is the LGO. So this is how actually you can explain. So now if I if I move further, you can focus on this particular diagram. So here I have shown you the same thing in that case. Okay, here you see this G is written here, that is the G-rayed one. Why? Because if you move from here to here, the phases are same. This is G-rayed, but in that case if you move from here to here, the phases are different, so that's why it is un-G-rayed one. Okay, similarly your EG orbitals are also there. Okay, how EG orbital? In that case you see it is doubly degenerate, so this is doubly degenerate, so I have shown only one in that case. At the right angles, other actually two will also be present, so I am not showing other two actually. which is very important. Okay, so how you can check the center of symmetry? If you start from here, go through the center of the molecule reaching at this particular end. Similarly, if you start from this end and you are reaching here, so that means your wave function sign is same. Okay, so it is G rate, that's why it is EG. But if you check for this one, if you start from here, so here you see the sign, wave function sign is different. Here also you can check the wave function sign is different, so this is un-G rate. Okay, and you can check for this one, this is E2G second set. You see same wave function, that's why it is Z rate. But in that case, if you travel from here reaching here, this and this is different. Similarly here to here, this and this is different, so this is the un-G rate one. This is how actually you can form, and please remember this is the Z axis of the molecule, right? So these are the actually ligand group orbitals of the 2 CP rings. Please remember this point. Okay, so what you can call them as actually the composite ring pi molecular orbitals. Okay, and remember for E1 and E2, for this E1 as well as for E2, okay, they are the doubly degenerate set. Okay, but I have shown only one, the other would be present at the right angles to this one. However, there is not much importance of whether to draw them or not actually. So this is something very important which you should know. I hope these things actually are making the sense. Now what you can do, you can check the symmetry properties of the metal orbital. Okay, so how they can combine in that case? So what I can do, I can shift this somewhere here. Okay, and obviously I have to remove this part. This I have explained. So here I am writing ligand group orbitals, LGOs. Obviously it would be of CP. And here you can see I am writing metal orbitals. And when you are dealing with the transition metal elements, that means you are having what? Here D, P and S orbitals. Okay, Nd, N plus 1 Nd, N1 plus V, N plus 1 P and N plus 1 S in that case. Okay, so here what I can do, I can write first as A1G. This A1G can interact with the S orbital, or it can interact with the Z square. Why? Because this is the G rate one and S orbital is also the G rate. How S orbital is the G rate, you know, if you want to draw the S orbital in that case. So this is spherical in sign. So all over your positive charge is there. So if you check the center of symmetry is present in that case. Similarly, the center of symmetry is also present in the dz square. Please remember, S orbital is centrosymmetric, it is G rate one. Okay, so that's why this actually A1G is overlapping with the S or with dz square, because symmetry properties matches. The ligand group orbital will have the same symmetry property. So you can call this S and dz square also as A1G symmetry. They are also having the A1G symmetry. Okay, and second I can give you, that is 2E1G doubly degenerate. Okay, this can interact with the dxz metal orbital and dyz metal orbital. And please remember, this is very important, and these two actually will form the two bond with the CP rings which actually the iron will form. So here you can see extensive overlapping would be there. Only this overlapping is important, extensive overlapping, while other overlappings are not of a very great importance because they interact very slightly. Then you may have another, that is say 2E1U, and this 2E1U has the symmetry properties which matches with the Px and the Py orbitals. It can interact with this one. Why? See, this is un-G rate, E un-G rate, which is this one actually, where I have drawn this one. This one, right? This can interact because this is un-G rate. This can interact with the PS. The PX actually your un-G rate one. How PX is the un-G rate? I can explain this. say this is your px orbital, here is the positive sign, here is the negative sign. So if you start from this end and move here, opposite wave functions are there. So that means it's ungyried. Center of symmetry is not present in the p orbitals. Please remember this point. Okay. So I can erase this part. This can interact with this one, and then you may have another thing, that is 2e2g Lie group orbitals, and they can interact with the dxy of the metal and dx squared minus y square of the metal. Okay, and for 2e2u, for ungyried one, there is no suitable orbital to match. No suitable orbital, okay, on metal atom to interact. And if you have finally say A2U, so it can interact with the PZ orbital. These things actually you will remember actually. Okay, so once you know these things, then you can check the interaction, how actually the interaction is happening. So in the next slide you can see here, if I increase the size of this one right here, you see in that case, focus on this one here, CpA1G is interacting with the 4s of the metal. Okay, I already told you that means A1G is what here, non-degenerate, and s orbital is also non-degenerate, but p orbital is triply degenerate, which breaks into the doubly and the non-degenerate. Okay, and here in the center you see this is the metal s orbital, this is the metal s orbital, and this is the ligand group orbitals of the two Cp rings. So this interaction you can show in that manner. Okay, and then you can focus here, this is Cp of Ag, it can interact with the dz square. So this is the dz square of the transition metal atom, which can interact with this one. You see actually the metal is sandwiched, metal orbitals are sandwiched in between the ligand group orbitals of these Cp rings actually. Here you can see here Cp of A2U, right, Cp of A2U, it can interact with the, not C, it should be actually E actually, right. So this can interact with the Px. Let me check actually which one is interacting with the Px. Okay, E1U is interacting with the Px, so it should be E1U actually. So this is the error here, so I can write E1U. Okay guys, this is E1U, not this one. E1U is interacting with the Pz. This is the error in it. And now you can see here Cp of E1G symmetry can interact with the dxz and the dyz. So here only dyz is shown, okay, and dxz would be at the right angles to it, this one, which actually I haven't shown. So this interaction you see d orbital is interacting with this one. And similarly you can see here E2G, Cp of E2G is interacting with the dxy and dx square minus y square. You can check there, E2G can interact with the dxy and dx square minus y square. So this interaction actually shown here. So this is how actually they interact. Please remember this point. And the very important thing is that please remember this point, which is, see, it is widely accepted that E1G group orbital, when interact with the E1G like metal orbitals, this orbital actually, this overlap is very, very extensive, and you know this will also have the 1 electron in the ligand group orbital, and this will metal will have the 2 unpaired electron. Okay, iron, you will in that case you can check, iron will have the 2 unpaired electrons. So what can happen, this iron, say for example if I draw here, say 1 unpaired electron on this d orbital, 1 unpaired electron on this orbital, I can write the electronic configuration for this one also. Okay, but it is not very important to write the electronic configuration, but you should know actually how it is happening in that case. So what can happen, your Cp E1G, it is also having the 1 electron, and they can interact and they will form the covalent bond. Similarly another Cp, it will interact with this one, they will form the covalent bond. Only this bonding interaction is important, rest all are actually negligible. You can ignore simply, you can ignore them. Why? Because the energy difference between them is very high. So please remember this point. It is widely accepted that the E1G overlap is very extensive, since each of these orbitals on the rings as well as on the metal, they have the one electron, and such overlap would result in the formation of the covalent bond, and that covalent bond will actually give you the sextate. That means the 6 electron to the CP ring, 6 electron to the CP ring, and thus accounts for the aromaticity also. Okay, and then you can see here, only this much you have to know. See, you need to know actually. Only this is important, while other interactions actually are not very large. These interactions are not very large because their energy difference is quite large in that case. So if I finally draw the molecular orbital diagram for this one, how the molecular orbital diagram looks like, let me check. So this is the molecular orbital diagram, guys. You can see which in that case, see, qualitative molecular orbital diagram of a metallocene. Here you see this is the CP ring, this is the CP ring, and this is the A1G, A2U, right? And here E1G, E1U, here E2G and E2U. If you count all of them, see 2 to 4 to 6, right, to 8. See here, see these are the doubly degenerate, 2 to 4, right? Here also they are also doubly degenerate, 6, 8, and they are the 10. So 10 ligand group orbitals are there in that case. And here are the metal d orbitals. So these are the metal d orbitals. This is your 4s orbital, this is your 4p orbital. Okay, and these metal d orbitals will have the different geometry, A1G, E1G, E2G, and I have already told you this one. You see here your metal DXY, this one DXZ and DXY would be of E1G geometry, and your 4s orbital would have the A1G geometry as well as the DZ square. Okay, and your PX and the PY will have the E1U geometry, and E2G geometry will match with the DXY and the DX square. So on the basis of this one, we have drawn this molecular orbital diagram. Now it is very important, you can see here whatever the electrons are present on the A1G or A2G, they actually belongs to the ligand itself. They are more ligand like. Okay, their energy is more close to the ligand. Okay, but see how actually they are overlapping in that case. See, I already told you this E1G can interact with this E1G, and only this overlap is quite important in that case. Why? Because there is not much energy difference between them. But you cannot interact this A1G with this S1G because it belongs to the 4s orbital. So their energy is quite large. When their energy is quite large, so there is not much significant overlapping in between them. We can ignore them. We can ignore it. Simply we can ignore it. Okay. Similarly, this is the E1U. This E1U cannot interact with this E1U of the P because their energy difference is quite high, right? But this E2G, okay, this E2G can very beautifully interact with this E2G. This interaction is possible because their energy are same, not very much difference in between them. So you have to focus on this one, right? So when you have the A1G molecular orbital, then definitely at the top you are having somewhere here, say if I made this one, say you focus on this one, say this is your A1G, and if I move here, this is A1G anti-bonding, A1G anti-bonding, A1G bonding, and this would remains non-bonding, A2U remains non-bonding. Okay, why non-bonding? Because it cannot interact with this one due to the large energy difference. Then similarly your A1G bonding, then definitely your E1G anti-bonding, star is over there, so they can interact in that case. Okay, and similarly your E1U, and this is your E1U, but this interaction is very low in that case. When E1U is there, then anti-bonding E1U is also there. So this diagram actually you can learn or you can understand, because see, based on this particular diagram you can have you can solve the various problems you can solve in that case. So it is something very important. Please remember, the CP A1G energy is too much less than the metal A1G orbital. Okay, so they cannot interact, their interaction is very less. Okay, so that means the A1G of the CP more ligand like, and A1G of this metal will more concentrated on the metal, and if the electrons are there, they remains as the non-bonding. and same is true for the A2U also. Okay, so this is how you can actually explain the diagram. So this is the bonding in the metallocenes, but we can do some practice in that case, how the ferrocene look like. So if you have the ferrocene, right, if you have the ferrocene, okay, so ferrocene is having how many electrons? It is 18 electron system. So you have to put 18 electrons in it. So how you can put the 18 electron in the ferrocene? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18. So finally 18 electrons are there in that case. Okay, so you can see here both the electrons are paired in that case. Both the electrons are paired. So this is actually the diamagnetic in nature. Please remember, this ferrocene is diamagnetic. This is diamagnetic in nature. No unpaired electrons are present. Okay, and configuration, electronic configuration is generally what? EC. I can write EC, electronic configuration. That electronic configuration is E2G4 and A1G2. Please check. 2 to 4 electrons are there which are present on the E2G, so that's why I have written E2G4, and this is your, say, A1G, which is having the 2 electrons. So A1G, these are having 2 electrons over there. Please remember. Okay, so this is actually diamagnetic species, and in that case you can see this A1G is the HOMO, okay, and this E1G antibonding is the LUMO. Please remember, in that case HOMO is A1G and LUMO is E1G. Okay, and these LUMO are very, very important for the electronic transitions. Please remember this point. Okay, and in that case the bond length I have already explained, right, and you can go for the color also for this particular compound. So this is all about your ferrocene. But if you have the cobaltocene, so what I can do, I can make a little change in it. I can erase this. Say if you have the cobaltocene, cobaltocene means cobalt is sandwiched between the two CP ring. How many electrons, valence electrons are there in that case? So 9 from here, 5 from here, 5 from here, total 19 electrons are there. Now you have to put the 19 electrons in it. So if you put the 19 electrons to it, you are already having the 18 electrons in this system. So your 19 electron will come here. Okay, so the electronic configuration in that case would become E2G4, A1G2, E1G antibonding 1. This is the configuration. Since it is having the one unpaired electron, so it is paramagnetic. It is paramagnetic in nature. And if you want to know the your magnetic moment in Bohr magneton, so you can put n into n plus 1. So root 1 into 1 plus 1, that means root 2, and that root 2 will give you 1.73 of Bohr magneton. So this is the magnetic moment in Bohr magneton. Please remember, in that case your HOMO, if you want to know the HOMO and the LUMO, so in that case your HOMO is basically your actually SOMO, singly occupied molecular orbital in that case, and that would be your E1G antibonding, and this would become LUMO, E2U would become LUMO. So in that case your LUMO would be E2U. This is how you can explain the things. Now if you have the nickelocene in that case, say for example if I erase this all, okay, if you have the nickelocene, so in the nickelocene, you know, your CP and your nickel is sandwiched in between the 2 Cp actually. So this will give you how many electrons? Your nickel actually will give you the 10 electrons, 5 from here, 5 from here. So it's a 20 electron system. Now you have to put the 20 electrons in it. Okay, so for 20 electrons, what you can do, you can put 1 electron here in the doubly degenerate set. So it is also the paramagnetic in nature. Nickelocene is also paramagnetic. It is also paramagnetic. Okay, 2 unpaired electrons are there. So you can calculate its magnetic moment, n into n plus 1. So 2 plus 1 under root of 6, that will give you somewhere around 2.86 of the Bohr magneton. Okay, in that case you can see again your HOMO. If you check your HOMO, so this would be your E1G anti-bonding, and LUMO E2U. So this is how you can check the magnetic behavior. In fact, you will remember this particular point. Only ferrocene would be your diamagnetic, rest all your cobaltocene, your nickelocene, your magnosine, right? Or say your chromocene, your vanadocene, they all are actually paramagnetic in nature. So however, see, I can explain some more things. If you have the vanadocene, right? So what can happen in the vanadocene? So vanadocene is nothing but it is your Cp2V. So vanadium will provide only 5 electrons in that case. So you'll have total 15 electrons. So now you have to put the 15 electrons in it. Okay. And now if I put the 15 electrons in it, so how I can put the 15 electrons? Please check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. 3 unpaired electrons, because see its magnetic moment shows that it has the 15 electron, but you can argue that when these two degenerate orbitals are empty, so why you are not pairing this electron? So in that case, please remember, in that case pairing energy is high in that case. Okay, pairing energy is very high than the splitting energy. So what can happen? See, system will not actually do those things which requires the high energy. So it cannot, this electron will not pair in this orbital, but it will go here. So it is having the 3 unpaired electron. When it is having the 3 unpaired electron, and it is indicated by its actually magnetic moment. So its magnetic moment is somewhere around 3.84 Bohr magneton, which actually shows the 3 unpaired electrons. So this is the concept of the pairing energy which you should remember. So the electronic configuration would become just like that: E2G 2, A1G 1, A1G 1. So this you can see here, E2G 2 and A1G 1. Okay, this is also the paramagnetic in nature. So this is something very important. And A1G is the HOMO and E1G antibonding is the LUMO in that case. Please remember this point. And if you have, say, next, if you have say chromosine, so Cp2 Cr if you have, so it will have this chromium will give you the 6 electron and these two will give you the 10 electrons. So it's a 16 electron species. It's a 16, please remember, it's a 16 electron species. Now if you want to put the 16 electrons into it, so how you can put the 16 electrons into it? Again, you see here how I can put the 16 electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16. Okay, see, again you see the concept of the pairing energy is there. So so that's why this electron, actually these 4 electrons will not pair into the E2G, but it will go up actually, right? So 2 unpaired electrons, and the presence of these 2 unpaired electrons can be indicated actually by the its magnetic moment. It is somewhere around 3.20. which suggests that it is having the 2 unpaired electron. Okay, so this is how you can actually explain the bonding in the metallocenes. But please remember, this bonding concept is applicable for the first transition series. There are lots of complications in the second and the third transition series. I am not going into that, but finally, see, I have summarized all these things here. This I have taken from the organometallic chemistry by Ajay Kumar, and Ajay Kumar itself copied this from your Hui. Okay, so all these things which I have explained to you, they are summarized here. You can do practice by your own. And here some of the important thing actually which are there in the James Hui book, which you can understand very beautifully. Say in that case, you see here, if you check this cobaltocene Cp2CO or your nickelocene, so 1 electrons and 2 electrons are present in the antibonding orbitals. So these since they are present in the antibonding orbitals, so they can be very easily removed from here. Okay, when the electrons can be removed here, that means they are very easily oxidizable. They can act as a reducing agent. Please remember, they can act as a reducing agent because they are having the high energy electron which you can remove from here. And this high energy, the electrons which are present in the antibonding electrons, so in that case bonding interactions are very less. So the bond length is quite large in that case when compared to the Cp2. Ferrocenes 206 picometer, it is having 212 because 1 electron is in the antibonding orbitals, and it is having 220 because it is 2 electrons are present in the antibonding orbitals, right? And they are very easily oxidizable. But this ferrocene is quite stable, you can see here. Okay, this ferrocene is quite stable, but still you can form the ferrocenium ion because it is observed that actually you can form the ferrocenium ion. Okay, so there are various things actually which you can understand. So I hope actually you understood the things actually on your metallocenes. So this is the concept of the bonding, chemical bonding in the metallocenes, and in the next class I'll continue with the different types of the metallocenes, their preparations, their synthesis, all these things actually, right? So I hope you like the lecture. If you understood the things completely, and if you are liking the lecture, please subscribe the tetrahedron chemistry classes. Do share the video with your friends, and please don't forget to press the like button. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much.